Welcome to the Presidential Distinguished Speaker Series, the first in 2018. This series is designed to bring here to our beloved Morgan some of the nation's leading and most provocative thought leaders from various disciplines and professional fields of study, exposing our university community to a broad range of views, a broad range of perspectives, and broad angles on the myriad of opportunities and challenges we face as a nation is in keeping with Morgan's mission of serving as Maryland's preeminent public urban research university, a university that is rooted deeply in the HBCU tradition. This series is simply designed to promote what we call mind expansion. It is designed to enable all of us, particularly our students, to wrestle with the ideas of the past. It is designed to enable us to challenge the issues of the present and to ponder the possibilities of tomorrow. You know, a college experience is supposed to enable us to develop the tools and the skills to think critically and to challenge common thinking. This is really what the Presidential Distinguished Speaker Series represents. In this series, we seek out individuals across the nation who are on the cutting edge of thought, individuals who embrace innovation, and individuals who espouse bold ideas. We seek individuals who have the ability often to see around corners, and individuals who are able to imagine, if you will, an America that is inclusive, an America that is equitable, an America that is just, and an America that is fair to everyone. In doing so, we hope that we are showing our community, and our students in particular, what it really means when we say here at Morgan that we are growing the future so you can lead the world. We here at Morgan value the free expression of ideas, and we value free thoughts, and we remain open always to diverse points of view and diverse speakers. As president, I understand the importance of our students being exposed to multifaceted points of view, for such views often lead to greatness in thought and to the greatness of possibilities. And so with that said, I'm happy to see all of you out this evening, and it is now my great pleasure to introduce our speaker for the evening. Now, her bio is printed, and I will highlight some aspects of that. But let me just say this. Oftentimes when I have an opportunity to watch television, many of you know it's not often that I do, but I do get occasion to watch CNN, not as much to watch The View, but certainly CNN. And I must admit that when Navarro is on CNN, and I hear all of these other talking heads, I hear all of the intellectual thoughts, I pull a little bit closer to the television, waiting for Navarro, because the minute she opens her mouth, it takes me back to my Afro dashiki days of the 70s. And I say something like, "Go on, sister." You tell them, right? Because oftentimes, you know, she has a way of just kind of cutting through the chase and saying, I believe, what many of us are saying about what we are seeing unfold in front of us with regard to our nation. And so Navarro, she's a GOP strategist and political commentator to CNN, ABC News, and also Telemundo. She is a well-known Republican strategist and a political analyst for CNN and CNN en Español. She is also a political contributor on ABC's The View The Miami New Times named her a Republican power consultant, and the Tampa Bay Times called her a sought-after voice in Republican politics and an advisor for any presidential hopeful, saying, quote, with confidants Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio, she is poised to play a big role in the GOP response to immigration reform and Hispanic outreach. Ana most recently served as the National Hispanic Co-Chair for Governor John Huntsman's 2012 campaign and the National Co-Chair of John McCain's Hispanic Advisory Council in 2008, where she was also the national surrogate for the McCain 2008 campaign. She has played a major role in several federal and state races in Florida, where she resides in Miami, and she served on Governor Jeb Bush's transition team in 1998 and was the first director of immigration policy in the executive office of the president. We're very pleased to have with us this evening Ms. Ana Navarro. Please join me in welcoming her to Morton.
First, I got to correct a couple of things. I'm not a trusted advisor to any Republican presidential candidate, not all of them. And as far as Marco Rubio, I'm over him. All right, so thank you so much for having me here. This is actually the first time I speak at an HBCU. And, oh, wait till you hear this. I'm honored by the perseverance, by the history, by the commitment to education that Morgan State represents. And I want to tell you a little story. So unlike Elizabeth Warren, I did take a DNA test. And actually last year, I got, must have been like right after the election, December or January 2017, I get an email from Henry Louis Gates. And Skip Gates, you guys know he's the host of Finding Your Roots. And he sends me this email telling me he wants to find my roots, research my roots. And of course I say yes, 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 because my father has been obsessed with finding his Spanish ancestry descendant from royals roots his entire life. Every Latino thinks they descend from Spanish royalty. And so I say yes, and Skip Gates sends me this lengthy questionnaire asking me everything you can possibly imagine about me, about my mom, my dad, my grandparents, he just asked, it was all sorts of information or personal information. I fill it out, I send it back. I don't hear back from him for, I don't know, about 2 weeks. And I literally turned around to my fiance and I said, I think I just gave all my personal information to the Russians. So Skip researches my roots, and my father flies up from Nicaragua because he's so excited to hear about the Marquis in his past. And lo and behold, I am a descendant of a freed African slave from Costa Rica. And he was born into slavery, and he bought his freedom. He was a shoemaker by trade, which explains my love of shoes. And I really can't tell you, I got emotional in the program. I can't tell you how much it means to me to know that I'm part African, well, I'm not African, well, yeah, I am African American, the hell with that. I'm Native American, and I am Spaniard, and I'm even Ashkenazi Jewish, and and that's what America is about. That's what makes America great. All right, so we've got some limited time because I got to get back. I'm on Don Lemon tonight. We need to talk about all the crap that's happening in the country. As if if any of you are Trump supporters, you're in the wrong place. This is a good time for a cigarette break because I was born missing the nuance gene. There's no way that we can sugarcoat the obvious. I was, before I go on, I was in Chicago last week, and they had a sign language interpreter. And so I learned the sign for Trump. I'm not making this up. I got another sign I like to use for him, but I'm not going to use it today. Back to the serious stuff. President Trump has adopted a divide and conquer strategy. He pits one group of people against the other. It worked for him during the campaign, and he has shown no desire to change course as president, which is why I am so happy to be here, because we must stand united as Americans. I have some friends who voted for Trump. Actually, some of them are former friends now. Not because of me. I don't make friends pass a political litmus test. I do make my fiancé pass a political litmus test, but I don't apply it to friends. I think it's rather stupid to require political agreement as a basis for friendship or any relationship. But this political cycle brought out something in people, and it goes both ways, left and right, where civil political disagreement and debate respecting diversity of thought seems impossible. And let me say this, and I think it's important for our communities. The people who voted for Trump, including Hispanics and including African Americans, those who voted for him because they wanted a conservative Supreme Court, because they didn't want a career politician, because of loyalty to their party, because they didn't like the alternative, because they felt taken for granted, because they wanted to control our borders, because they wanted, they wanted to follow up electing the first black president by electing the first orange president. The people who voted for him, at least not all of them, are deplorable. We must respect people's right to make their own choice and exercise their own right to vote as they deem best. I urge you not to question people's motives or patriotism or take away their Hispanic or their black card because of who they vote for or support, except Ted Cruz and Ben Carson. Lord, you guys know Ted Cruz is half Hispanic, right? Obviously the half that does not include his heart. His father came here as a Cuban immigrant, achieved the American dream, and his son, a senator, has not done a damn thing to help dreamers achieve the same. And Ben Carson, what can I tell you about this guy? Yeah. He thinks slaves were immigrants. He thinks the pyramids are grain silos, and he spends $31,000 on dining room set. That's more than most people who he is supposed to help at the Department of Housing and Urban Development make in 1 year. So I have no qualms. I give some of his supporters slack, cut them some slack, but I have no qualms about saying Donald Trump is deplorable and misogynist and racist and bigoted. Calling Mexicans rapists and criminals is deplorable. Calling prisoners of war losers is deplorable. Calling black athletes who decide to exercise their First Amendment rights to protest sons of bitches is deplorable. Questioning a U.S.-born judge's impartiality because his parents were Mexican immigrants is deplorable. Telling African Americans they have nothing to lose is deplorable. Yes, they have their dignity to lose. Boasting about sexual assault is deplorable. Not using his bully pulpit to denounce acts of hate and bigotry is deplorable. Equating neo-Nazis with those that protest against them is deplorable. Not denouncing a domestic abuser who was working for him in the White House is deplorable. Endorsing a pedophile candidate for the U.S. Senate is deplorable. Conducting ICE raids in churches is deplorable. Ending DACA and then not doing a damn thing to fix the problem. Keeping hundreds of thousands of young Americans in every way but one, living in fear is deplorable. Mocking little Marco Rubio for being short. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know how that one got in there. And I want to teach you the word deplorable in Spanish, so you don't go home saying you didn't learn anything today. Deplorable. Say it with me. Deplorable. You guys got it. But look, this deplorable president, he's got our communities, among many others, under attack. It's not just us. It's gays, it's Muslims, it's some Jewish folks. It's many communities under attack, women. But even if you have all your needs taken care of, even if you're getting an education here, even if you're going to be okay, even if you've got a good paying job, if our communities are a target, every single one of us is a target. If core American values of unity and equality and fairness and basic decency are under attack, we are all under attack. when Trump demonizes immigrants and African Americans, and he has a particular penchant for attacking African Americans, whether it's Colin Kaepernick or John Lewis or Maxine Waters. He says Maxine Waters has a low IQ. Did you guys listen to his Secretary of Education yesterday? You know, money can buy you a lot of things, but it can't buy you class, and it can't buy you brains. Anyways, where was I? When he attacks them, he's attacking each one of us. Everybody that looks and sounds like us. And so today I'm using us because I'm us, okay? Give me the, we have two choices right now. We can either ignore what's going on all around us, ignore the human suffering, ignore the fear, ignore the distress and the despair of our communities. We can choose to build a protective cocoon, I think he prefers a wall, and wait for someone to wake us up when this is over, or we can fight back. Sorry, folks, ignorant bliss, sitting on the bleachers, it's not an option. We must fight back. We must fight back hard, and we must fight back together. Every dreamer who lives in fear of being kicked out of the country they love and the only life they know, they need us to fight back. The mother or father who cannot sleep at night for fear they will be deported at any moment and have to leave their children to God knows what fate, they need us to fight back. The African American children hearing that athletes that look like them and have worked hard as hell to succeed in life are told to shut up and dribble, need us to fight back. I refuse to be lectured about family values by people supporting tearing immigrant families apart and at the same time defending a president who we've learned was having affairs with a porn actress and a Playboy bunny at the same time. It's a lot of things people do for money. It's hard out there. The one silver lining the Trump election, I do think, has brought is that something that had been asleep in America has awoken. The American spirit to defend our values, to defend the things that unite us, it has awoken and is alive in each of us. You guys are being way too quiet today. You really are. I need you with me. We see this awakening in the millions of women who marched in Washington and across the country the day after his swearing in. We see it in the thousands of people who showed up at airports to protest the Muslim ban. And I don't know if you guys have ever been to LaGuardia, but nobody shows up there to have a picnic. We saw it in the African American women who showed up to vote against a pedophile in Alabama. We saw it in the teachers in West Virginia who took to the streets to demand better pay. We see it in the women saying enough is enough through the Me Too movement. We see it in the students of Stoneman Douglas in Florida who fearlessly speak truth to power and demand to be able to go to school without fearing that they will lose their lives. You know, this thing of Stoneman Douglas, I'd always thought the gun stuff was not my issue. I don't understand guns. I really am not conversant on the difference between an automatic and a semi, and all this stuff. I can hardly operate a glue gun. But this happened, this is the third major mass shooting in Florida in the last 2 years. We had Pulse, 49 people. We had Fort Lauderdale Airport, 5 people. And now we had these 17 people in Stoneman Douglas. It's 40 miles from my house. I gotta tell you something, folks. The gun issue is all of our issues. And we must fight for our children to be able to go to school in peace. We must claim our country back. Because whether some like it or not, whether some deny it or not, whether the President of the United States acknowledges it or not, this is our country as much as anybody else's. Each one of us is an American, as American as the descendants who came on the Mayflower. In fact, forget the Mayflower. Unless you tell me you're a Navajo or a Sioux or a Cherokee, we all came after them. And by the way, he might be a little orange, but he's not a Navajo or a Sioux or a Cherokee. Do not allow anyone to tell you or treat you differently. Every immigrant who has come to this country, whether 400 years ago or 4 days ago, knows what this president seems not to know. America was built by people who came here looking for better opportunities or who were forced to come here in shackles. and fought for freedom and equal opportunities. And we are not going to let anybody take that away. America is a land of immigrants. Hell, including his own grandparents and at least 2 of his 3 wives. Did you hear how she came on a genius visa? And her parents, they came here too. You know that, have you guys heard about that chain migration stuff? All right, America's exceptional. America is already great. And I've mentioned immigrants a lot today, but you know who are not immigrants? Puerto Ricans aren't immigrants. They are Americans from the day they are born. And I hope to God that the hundreds of thousands of Puerto Ricans who have left the island and moved to the mainland, millions of them, millions of people, and the millions of people of Puerto Rican descent who are already here, remind everybody just how American they are by doing the most American thing we have, which is voting in November. If we have any Puerto Ricans here, if you guys know any Puerto Ricans, I got Puerto Ricans here, register, get your family to register. Register, get your family to register. Move to Florida, you can make a difference there. I want them to take those rolls of paper towel, you guys know what I'm talking about? And help clean up the mess that this administration has created. There is absolutely no reason why an American citizen should be without electricity for 6 months. I can tell you this, the people in Texas, the people in Florida, they would not have been allowed to be without electricity for 6 months. This is Donald Trump's Katrina. But at least George W. Bush had the sense and the humility to accept it and apologize and try to do something to solve it after he realized the initial mistake. But I forget, this guy doesn't ask for forgiveness. Anyways, look, it's not enough to say all this. It's not enough to come here and listen to speeches. We must get up. We must get active. Help the newly arrived Puerto Ricans register to vote. We must lead. We must get loud. We must speak for those who are afraid to speak. We must fight for the dreamers. We must denounce injustice everywhere we see it. And that includes standing up for the gay couple who's afraid to lose their rights, or the Muslim woman who's afraid to wear her hijab in public, or the Jewish mother who's afraid of the threats at her child's school. We must join with the kids demanding to be able to go to school without fearing for their lives. Donald Trump's election has revealed the ugly underbelly of America. He didn't invent polarization, but he made it worse. He didn't invent racism, but he legitimized it. He didn't create division, but he promoted it. And it's up to us all together to fight against it and take our country back. So now, I am going to sit down because Ms. Shipp is going to ask me. I told her she could, and you all can ask me, there's microphones. You guys, this is family. You're gonna get a blunt, straight answer from me. You can ask me about anything except my fluctuating weight, for which I also blame Donald Trump. Is this on?
Yes, ma'am.
And mine is on also? Hello, everybody. I'm E.R. Shipp, and I'm a journalist and a journalism professor here at Morgan.
She's so serious. Come on, let's have some fun.
I see some of my students out there, so I'm glad to see you. You have cited all the reasons that many of us in the audience have for distrusting Donald Trump and equating Donald Trump with the Republican Party. So the question first is, why are you a Republican?
You know, that's a very good question. I'm not going to lie to you. Part of it is stubbornness and masochism at this point. No, look, I grew up in a very different Republican Party. Each of us is who we are plus our circumstances. I grew up in Miami, Florida, where there were Republicans that were fighting for my interests. There were Republicans who looked and sounded like me, who represented me. People like Lincoln Diaz-Balart, like Ileana Ross-Layton, and like Jeb Bush. I mean, he wasn't Hispanic, but he tried hard. And so I grew up in a much more inclusive Republican Party. I fled Nicaragua. My parents fled Nicaragua. I came here when I was 8 years old, fled communism, and that's when Reagan was fighting the Cold War, was fighting communism. So, you grew up with that as a, with him as a quasi-deity. This is not the Republican Party I grew up in. I grew up in the Republican Party, and I helped people like John McCain. I helped people like Mitt Romney. I helped people like Jeb Bush. John Huntsman. I feel like Donald Trump has staged a not so hostile takeover of the Republican Party. And I think Republicans, many Republicans in leadership, have looked the other way because they wanted Neil Gorsuch, because they wanted the Republican agenda, because they got tired of fighting back, because they thought he was going to change with the presidency. Well, look, I got a little experience with men. Men don't change after they're done teething. Donald Trump is not going to change. And so they have, at this point, they have become complicit with what Donald Trump is doing. They are, and I see it day after day after day. You think that if Barack Obama had paid hush money to a stripper, he wouldn't be investigated? Well, you know what? He probably wouldn't be investigated because Michelle would have killed him. You think that if the Russians had meddled to influence the elections in favor of Hillary Clinton, she wouldn't be impeached already? You think that if Hillary Clinton had had 40 people in the White House working without a security clearance, that wouldn't have been investigated? So I see the hypocrisy and the complicity every single day, and I want to call it out, and I want to call it out as a Republican. I also believe that we are better off, all of us, as Americans in our communities, when you have two strong parties fighting for and courting our support. I don't want to be taken for granted by one and the other not to even care and antagonized by the other. And so, I've got two choices. I can either take my toys and go home, or I can stay in there, keep irritating the hell out of them, and calling things out as a Republican from within the tent. The other thing is, listen, I was a Republican when Donald Trump was a Democrat. I was a Republican when Donald Trump was an independent. And so the idea that this guy is going to make me leave kind of pisses me off.
So what is the Republican Party to which you belong?
Oh, it exists somewhere in my head. Right now I would tell you it's the historical Republican Party, right? Parties
Going back
parties
to
change.
Lincoln? Because that was a party for black people when it was Lincoln's party.
Look, it wasn't, it wasn't, dinosaurs were not roaming the earth when George W. Bush was able to get 44% of the Hispanic vote. It was a different tone in America. Did they get it all right? No. Were there mistakes made? Yes. But do I think there was a legitimate desire to make the Republican Party more inclusive back then? Yes. I think this Republican Party today, Trump's Republican Party, these people are Trump-publicans. They're not Republicans. They put Trump over country. They put Trump over party. Because looking the other way with Russian meddling, that the fundamental of our democracy is the ability to have transparent, credible elections. And to see I'm so old. I remember when Republicans were against adulterer presidents, against Russian despots, and for law enforcement. And it's like Freaky Friday.
So how do you get back that Republican Party? Because the Republican leadership has rolled over for Donald Trump, it seems. So where will this party emerge from?
Look, I think that's going to have to rebuild from the ashes. I think the only thing that's going to make a difference is losing, and I think that's coming. Winter is coming. I think every politician I know wants to get reelected. And the problem is, right now, the Republican base is very much supportive. They do not budge with Donald Trump, and they vote in primaries. And so if you don't win a primary, you don't get to a general election, but I think a lot of these folks are going to lose in general elections. And you know, it's very jarring and a wake-up call to go from the majority to the minority. All of a sudden have to hand over that gavel. And I think that's coming, certainly, you know, most likely in the House, maybe in the Senate.
The election of Trump did galvanize lots of people, mostly from the left, I think. But some people who are more centrist have decided that they need to speak up too. You described this now as an awakening of the American spirit. But I'm seeing an awakening of white nationalism and all of that too. How do we assure that this American spirit you're describing will not be overcome by this other, more evil spirit that we also see awakening?
Well, look, there's more of us than there are of them.
You think?
Yes, I do. I mean, I know. There's more of us than there are of them. We have got to keep up the intensity. That intensity we saw from African-American women in Alabama, that intensity that we saw in the women's marches, the intensity that we are seeing now around the gun issue, people making a difference through their wallet, you know, making things like Delta and Hertz and Volvo and Keurig, you know, take political stands. We've got to keep all of that up. You know, I think the biggest concern I have, the biggest fear I have, is that we get numb to this, that we get numb to the insanity, that we somehow normalize it, that we just get used to living the way that we are living now. And we must resist the urge to normalize this and get used to this. This is unacceptable. It's unacceptable today. It's unacceptable tomorrow. It's unacceptable every single day that is happening. So how do we lose? I mean, look, we're gonna, you know, this is a battle. Well, this is a battle. I absolutely agree with you. He legitimized, you know, people tell me I have friends who are friends with Donald Trump. And they would call me during the campaign, mad as hell with me, because I would call him a racist. And they would say that he's not a racist. But, you know, they absolutely vouched for him that he was not a racist. Well, here's the way I see it. He promoted racism. He peddled to racism. He allowed racism in his rallies. If you peddle to racism, if you promote racism, if you allow racism, you are a racist. You know, being racist, being bigoted, being a discriminatory person, that's not, whether you're passive or active doesn't matter. If you are not a racist, you fight it. And he did not fight it. He allowed it, he promoted it, he peddled to it. And so we got to continue the intensity. We got to continue the intensity. I'm going to be out there and, you know, marching with the kids on March 24th. I hope some of you will too. You know, we've got to look at all these causes as our causes.
How do we keep the various coalitions together? When the women marched last year, there were women from all political spectrums, economic levels, et cetera. They were marching largely, I think, against Trump. But when it came to other issues, they were at each other's throats, it seemed a bit. They did not trust each other. How do we find enough common issues that we can build a coalition that's effective?
First, you're right. I mean, there were people from all over this. I mean, to me, the story of that women's march is remarkable. It was an effort started by a housewife, a mom in Hawaii. And I don't know how many of you have been to Hawaii, but I don't know how anybody who lives in Hawaii, you know, can even care of what's happening here. I mean, you know, I don't know how you're not on the beach with your toes in the sand, drinking something frothy with a little umbrella on. And it turned into this organic, you know, ground-up movement. Yes, I think and organic movements are sometimes disorganized and undefined. I marched in it, first because it was fun, but also, you know, it was not about a particular agenda. I wanted Donald Trump to know that we were there, and that we were mad, and that we were active, and that we were ready to be vigilant for our rights. Look, I don't think you have to agree on everything to be together against what's happening, against the the assault on America that is happening. I don't think we have to agree on everything. I don't think that we have to agree on, some of the most divisive things. I think it's okay to have disagreements as long as we're as long as we got to be for one thing, America, and what America stands for.
The other side think it is for what America stands for, too.
They're wrong.
Let's hope so. You all should start making your way to the microphones. I think there are two, one on either side of the room, and I'll let you get involved here. You said you made a very persuasive case for many of us in the room for Donald Trump being deplorable. How do you respond to a question that we sometimes hear? Is Donald Trump your president?
Yeah, nobody asks me that, because I think the answer is obvious. Look, Donald Trump is not my choice for president. For me, it was very difficult. For a long time during the campaign, from day one, I said I would not support him. The day he came down in those stairs and called Mexicans rapists and criminals, that was the end of that. Actually, I never even liked him before that. I didn't like him in The Apprentice. I thought that was a rather stupid show. And I thought the ties and suits at Macy's were rather hideous. And I was, I always found the birther stuff before he was president unacceptable and rather ridiculous, ridiculous spectacle. I'm disappointed, frankly, in our communities that we didn't stand up sooner, that we didn't demand that Macy's take him off, that we didn't demand that NBC take him off when he was calling into question Barack Obama's citizenship. We should have been awoke then. So I was not going to support Trump. And then when he went on to do all those other things, there's just I will never, ever, 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 ever support Donald Trump. It was very hard for me to support Hillary Clinton. I had my issues with her. I thought there were very blurry lines between the Clinton political, business, and philanthropic world. Little did I know about blurry lines. I thought she had shown bad judgment at certain times. I thought she was taking communities of color for granted, not campaigning enough, not showing up in our places, not advertising enough, not doing enough. So for a long time, I said I was going to vote for my mom. And then all these people started writing me on Twitter and stuff and saying they were going to vote for my mom, too. And I would say it on TV, and my mom, who's an American, she lives in Nicaragua, she was in a froth. She was having a nervous breakdown. I actually think she thought she was going to win. And, the week before the election, I was in Florida. The polls were saying Hillary Clinton was going to win, but I had this, this funny feeling, like frogs know a hurricane is coming. And I decided, that I needed to do absolutely everything I could to stop Donald Trump from being president. Because while I thought Hillary Clinton had exercised bad judgment at times, I think Donald Trump is a bad human being. So if I have to choose between a good human being with bad judgment or a bad human being with bad judgment, I'll take the good human being with bad judgment. And it was a binary choice. I think a lot of Americans didn't see it as a binary choice, thought that, oh, you know what, I don't like her, she hasn't done enough, so I'm going to go and vote for, what was her name, the lady?
Oh, from the Green Party.
From the Russian party. Or the other guy, the pot-smoking guy from New Mexico. And it was a binary choice. So I don't remember what the hell you asked me, but that's my answer.
Is Donald Trump, how do you answer the question?
Oh, is Donald Trump my president?
Are you part of the Not My President coalition?
I've never said that. I never, I'm not hashtag not my president. He's not my choice. I don't like him. And the reason I think Donald Trump is not my president is because he's chosen not to be my president. He's chosen not to represent me. He's chosen not to represent women. He's chosen not to represent immigrants. He's chosen not to represent Hispanics. He's chosen not to represent African Americans. He's chosen not to represent gays. He's made it very clear who he represents. He represents the Trump base. And that's about it. And so the reason he's not my president is because he acts like he's not my president. So yeah, he's not my president.
Okay, we'll start on this side of the room.
Yes, good evening, Ms. Navarro. You've already said that you're willing to speak out against Trump and his antics. My question is, why do you think the Republican leadership, beginning with House Speaker Paul Ryan, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, while they're so quiet in Trump's continuous off-the-rails and erratic behavior, to include likely violation of the Emoluments Clause, in making innumerable jaunts to Mar-a-Lago to include Air Force One and security detail at our expense, to allow nepotism in the White House. This question is punctuated when reflecting that Majority Leader Paul Ryan was one of Trump's strongest character-based critics before the election. Is it their willingness to be disingenuous to their own subconscious sense as a statement of their hatred for democratic tenets?
No, look, I think I know Paul Ryan. And, for me, Paul Ryan was the great Republican hope. He was the guy who could, talk about immigration and talk about poverty and talk about justice reform. He was the, Jack Kemp compassionate Republican, compassionate conservative. I think Paul Ryan has, and I've had this conversation with Paul Ryan, he has stopped being Paul Ryan in order to be Speaker of the House, in order to be the team captain. He has put his own principles and his own convictions in the back burner, and he has, allowed this. Look, Paul Ryan is not, Paul Ryan is a decent human being, but he's looked the other way.
And you can't be decent and do that.
Well, you're right. I mean, I think it comes to a point where you can't look at yourself in the mirror and say, I am living up to my conscience and not speaking up. Look, they've become complicit because they wanted to pass a tax reform bill, and they did. So, what Donald Trump does very ably is he does 100 things that people want to, just, have a conniption over, just really reject. But then he does the one thing that makes them happy. And for that one thing that makes them happy, they're willing to put up with the 99 things that makes them unhappy. They're happy about Neil Gorsuch. They're happy about the tax bill. A lot of them, in the religious right, are happy about the curtailing of LGBTQ rights that are going on all over this country. They are happy about the regulations that have been overturned, that have made it a much more, business-friendly environment. So I think that's what it is. It is, they have compromised their own principles and convictions and the sense of decency in exchange for those things that Trump has done that makes them happy. They've rationalized it, I also think they've kind of gotten used to being quiet. And that's why I tell you we can't get numb to it and we can't normalize it, because once you're quiet the first time, you're going to be quiet the second time, and you're going to be quiet the third time, and you're going to pretend you don't know that's going on in the news. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I hear Republican leadership say, I didn't know. Well, Paul Ryan said last week, Stormy Daniels, that's not on my radar. Well, boy, then you got a broken radar. So that's the answer.
Thank you.
On this side?
What do you think the Republican Party has left to offer for people of color?
Are there any Republicans in the room who'd be willing to say they're Republican? Maybe you can also help answer the question.
No, look, I think it's important to know that we're not all homogeneous, right? Not all Hispanics think alike, not all immigrants think alike, not all women think alike, not all African Americans think alike, and that's okay. People have different priorities. For some people, paying less taxes is a priority. For some people, foreign policy is a priority. For me, being treated with dignity is a priority. I can't get, and I tell this to some of my Republican friends, I cannot get to having a policy discussion if I think that you are treating me and my people with a lack of respect and a lack of dignity. But some people have different priorities. And it's, it's what I said before. I mean, we just, it's a mistake to try to think, all brown people think the same, all black people think the same. No, there's different people there's people with different priorities. Ben Carson. Do you guys remember when being a brain surgeon used to be the standard for intelligence?
But he's a retired brain surgeon.
Still, he operated in people's brains, People used to say, it doesn't take a brain surgeon, it doesn't take brain surgery.
He lost it all, that's why he's retired.
Welcome to Baltimore, Ms. Navarro. First of all, I want to give you a little bit of help for never answering my tweets. Just because there's 8,000 others, I don't think you should ignore me.
What's your Twitter handle?
No, got to think about it. No VNDD for POTUS. Stands for No Vietnam Draft Dodger for POTUS. Okay. But my question is this. I'm a child of the 60s, was here at this institution back in the 60s and 70s. We marched on Annapolis, Maryland, the state capitol, because the governor wouldn't give Morgan State money when it was giving the white institutions money. So came up through all of that, the civil rights era. So now we're seeing women sort of, rise up and really take, wrest control from a lot of men in a lot of instances. The problem is this. Back during that time, the white power structure, which was white men predominantly, were caught off guard when we marched in the streets, we did things like that. And the reaction was a knee-jerk reaction. They sicked dogs on us, they hit us with hoses, they did all kinds of things, incarcerated us, the whole deal. And America said, wait a minute, whoa, you can't do that. They are citizens, even if they're black. And they kind of got caught off guard, but they, backed off and they waited and we made a lot of gains, et cetera. But ultimately what they did was they got to our leadership, they infiltrated our organizations, they found ways of nullifying the gains that we made. And even to the point where now, quite frankly, demonstrations by black people just really don't carry the clout that they used to. So now you've got the women's movement who's done the same thing, and they're celebrating victories, and I marched with them, and I'm proud of them, I'm telling you. But
Did you wear a pussy hat?
I'm sorry?
Did you wear a pussy hat?
No, my wife won't let me wear that. But let me just say this. My question is, how are you all prepared at this point in time to prevent that same thing from happening down the road? Because they'll be quiet and they'll let you do your thing for a while. But power doesn't give up power easily. And white men in this culture will find ways to weaken and to dilute the movement. And if women aren't careful, that's going to happen to them. So my question is, how do you keep that from happening? Well,
look, one of the ways that it's happening is, where white men are saying, well, oh my God, this Me Too thing, this sexual harassment thing is so scary that best thing to do is not to hire women. Or, or like Mike Pence says, well, the best thing to do is not to be alone with women. And I'm not sure I want to be alone with Pence, but okay. And part of the reason that I talk about the awakening of America as a result of Donald Trump's election, because I do a lot of co-hosting of The View. I've met a lot of these celebrities. I know a lot of these celebrities who were the pioneers, came out, were the first ones to come out against Harvey Weinstein, which I think was a watershed moment on the sexual harassment issue. And without exception, each one of them, I've asked them, and without exception, each one of them has told me that Donald Trump's election was the last straw. It was the catalyst to get them out there, to make them lose fear, to get them to shed the cloud of silence that had been, imposed on them for such a long time. Look, on the women thing, here's, the women thing is a little, I think, more difficult to squash than black civil rights and Hispanic civil rights, and I'll tell you why. Because there are black women, there are brown women, there are yellow women, there are working women, there are celebrity women, there are famous women. There's 55% women in the student body here. So, because women are not really a minority, and because we go through all the different, there's no color barriers, there's no ethnic barriers, there's no race barriers, there's women, everywhere. And how do we keep that from happening? I think by building alliances with other groups, by making sure that it's, this is not seen as just a woman's movement. It's also got to be a man's movement. It is a human movement.
That's right.
Sexual harassment is a human issue. It's not a woman issue. Domestic abuse is a human issue. It is not a woman's issue. And so I think it's about that. I think we have to make it not only a woman issue, but we have to make sure that men are included, are allies, are soldiers, and are responsible, are responsible for it. I think the Harvey Weinstein thing has been a watershed moment, and I think the Rob Porter thing in the White House, the domestic abuser guy, has been a watershed moment. Because, a lot of times people think that domestic abusers, there's a stereotype of what they look like, and here was, this nice Mormon boy in Dockers and blue blazers who went to Harvard and this and that, and he was beating up his wives. And had we not seen a picture, had we not seen a picture of a black eye, that man would still be in the White House without a security clearance, handling classified information. So by the way, when shit happens, take a picture. You all have got to learn how to take selfies. I was, a lot of the professors asked me for selfies upstairs. They can't operate their phones. I mean, don't look like
I
that.
don't think that was the journalism faculty, and we know how to do the phones.
Can I ask one other quick question? It's an opinion about
Give some other people a chance.
I am.
No, let's get some other.
Okay.
Go back to the line.
But I want to pick up on that. One of the challenges with the women's movement writ large is to keep women focused on the big issues and not falling prey to those who would say that, well, black women in the city have nothing in common with those white women in the suburb, and they really aren't going to have your back when you need it. I'm hearing a lot of that there are efforts to magnify what little differences there may be to keep there from being this broader coalition.
Look, I hear that too. I hear some conservative people, conservative women who don't want this, who are somehow see this women's movement as a threat to conservatives, bring up
Family.
pro-life, pro-choice issues, which are so divisive. I just think we have to say no. I don't fall into that trap. I think one of the things that I think we learned through women starting to talk about the sexual harassment issue, is that, I don't know a woman, including myself, who has not faced it. I remember watching this segment of Meet the Press, and when it was, at its climax, and it was all these powerful women, governors and congresswomen and senators, and each one of them got asked, have you ever faced sexual harassment? And each one of them had at least one story. And they were from all over the country. They were from rural areas and urban areas and Hawaii and, different colors. It's not an urban or, it's not, this is not like, for example, the gun issue, right? Where a lot of people who want to, the NRA wants to make it into, when there's a mass shooting, the first thing they say is Chicago. We can't talk about this, go focus on Chicago. Or Baltimore. Well, no, we all have children, and they all have a right to go to school and be safe. So I think we have to fight against fabricated divisions. And you know one of the things that has scared me the most about this entire Russia, meddling, is how much they influence our social media and our psyche, how much they understand American psyche. They have been playing us on both sides of issues, sowing discord in America. That, to me, is very scary.
I agree. Over here.
How are you, Ms. Navarro?
Hi.
I have a question. So you said that you mentioned that you saw not CNN, I'm sorry, 60 Minutes, the Betsy DeVos interview. What are your thoughts on that? And do you think like she really is trying to help poor communities in the United States? No.
She says she doesn't visit them.
Right.
No, that interview was a hot mess. That interview was such an embarrassment. And here's the problem with the interview. It's not in a vacuum. We saw her, this was, part 2. This was the bad sequel, because we saw her being incapable of answering basic questions in her confirmation hearing. We'd forgotten how dumb she sounded then. And it's not like, to me, the why this was so awful is because she wasn't being asked to solve a mathematic equation. She was being asked the most basic questions about schools and education, and her inability to articulate coherent answers, leads you to think that she's incompetent, that she's incapable. She might have some other skills, right? Look, she's been, and I have to tell you this about Betsy DeVos. I have friends who have been in the, who are very supportive of her, who've known her before she was Secretary of Education, when she was an education advocate. People who care tremendously about education, and who I consider are very, very well-informed and educated and master the issues. People like Jeb Bush, people like Mitt Romney. But there's a huge difference between being an advocate and donor to running the department. I'm a passionate advocate for immigration reform. I can't go run DHS. I'd like to. That'd be fun. But
Donald, let me know.
so I think that's what we are seeing in her. That interview, and if you all haven't seen it, please do. It was Leslie Stahl. I had not seen such a cringe-inducing interview since Sarah Palin said she could see Russia from her backyard.
How are we doing on time for questions?
I think we may have time for about 3 more questions.
But make them quick. You guys
Really
are giving
quick questions.
speeches.
Quick ones. Okay.
Really quick.
Hello,
I'm
Ms.
cutting
Navarro.
you off at like 15 seconds.
Gotcha. I talk fast.
Okay.
I got this.
Dale.
All right. So my question: we've been talking about women's issues and stuff. I am a huge someone who really cares about those kinds of issues as a woman. And I would ask you, when we all watched the election cycle of 2016, we saw Hillary Clinton was treated as a female candidate, and kind of like the difference between how her scandals were treated by Donald Trump and the kind of language that was used to describe her. So I'm asking you if you've also experienced that, and how you can deal with that in your workplace, and how we all can deal with that in our everyday lives.
Look, I'm a woman, I'm an immigrant, I'm Hispanic, and I'm fat. I get a lot of hate thrown my way. I don't give a shit. I think
I like it.
there's two, really, there's, I think it's their problem. I'm sure I've been discriminated against. I am sure, I have faced those issues. But somehow, I went to a Sacred Heart all-girls school, and it just somehow does not pierce my skin. I just think I'm so arrogant, I don't acknowledge it. When I first got on TV, I would get the most horrible, I still get them. I get even more of them now. I would get horrible, horrible tweets, calling me fat, calling me this, calling me that, telling me to go back to Mexico. Mind you, I wasn't born in Mexico.
Not born from Mexico.
Tell me, so, those people, the ones who liked me would tell me, that I had a sexy Latina accent. The ones who hated me would tell me to go back to Mexico. I didn't know I have an accent. I'm from Miami. We all talk like this. And, you know, and then one day, literally, it was like the lights turned on. I really couldn't care less. I mean, you know, Donald Trump has tweeted against me. I wish he would tweet against me more. I wear it as a badge of honor. It's, you know, that kind of hate to me is not my inferiority, it's their inferiority. It's not my problem, it's their problem. And so today I feel stronger because I stopped giving a shit. And just do it. Be like a tennis shoe, just do it.
I think many of
Thank
the
you so
women in
much.
this room can attest to that attitude. That's how we've gotten here. Very quickly, we probably aren't going to get to everybody, so can we just question, please, quickly?
Okay, can I just take this mic off? I'm kind of short. So. Okay. So my question is that if Trump called you right now to be an advisor in the White House, would you do it? Because I feel like the White House right now, it's an echo chamber. You know, it's full of yes men. And if there was at least one person to say, you know, maybe this was not a good idea, then maybe that could make a lot of difference. So do you think that if they had called you and said that we want you to work in here, would you do it, or do you think it's just like a lost cause and you just want it should just it's just a lost cause?
I think it's a lost cause. I mean, I think it's a lost cause. First of all, it's a nest of vipers. The turnaround you've seen in that White House, you don't see at McDonald's. You know, the firings and hirings and backstabbing, incompetence. And like I said, nothing will change Donald Trump. Donald Trump will not change. This is who Donald Trump has been his entire life. He is a megalomaniac, narcissistic, immature man baby.
Thank you, Ms. Navarro. I appreciate you
Pick up
being
the
here today.
microphone.
My name is Tyreek Brown, and I'm a new student here at Morgan State, so forgive me if my question is a little vague. But I would like to know, how do you feel on capitalism and how it's affecting all of us? Because when me and my community go to the stores, we see foreign people running the stores, whether it's Dunkin' Donuts, whether it's a gas station, or whatever. So we have no problem with immigration, but we have a problem with being employed. And as a new student here, I just started my own business, which is called RIQ LLC. It's a civil engineering, consulting, and land surveying company. And I recommend all of our students start their own business. And until that break comes, what do you think we should do about the problem of capitalism in our communities?
Look, I think immigration is a net gain for this country. First of all, we're not reproducing enough to keep up the workforce. Also, you know, I think immigrants come and they consume and they contribute and they pay taxes. You know, I think I'm a believer in capitalism. I'm a believer in opportunity, in personal responsibility. But I also know that we are a country where there is hunger, where there is unemployment, where there is inequality, and where there needs to be a safety net for those of us who need it. Because, you know what? We're all a tragedy away from being in bad straits, whether it's a natural disaster or a personal disaster. We are all a tragedy away from, or a sickness, you know? We're all a tragedy away from being in very bad economic shape. So, so I think I would call myself a pragmatic, compassionate capitalist.
Okay. Over here.
How you doing, Anna?
Hi.
Hey, you're going to actually get a question from a conservative. So I thought you were going to be a little bit more substantive. I didn't think it was going to be a lot of Trump bashing or a lot of identity politics. But the question that I want to ask you is in reference to DACA. As we know, you're very big on DACA. You want immigration to be passed. So that will permit not just 800,000, but close to about 20 million Latinos coming into the country.
We're talking about DACA or immigration reform comprehensive?
Immigration reform with DACA included. Okay. Now, what's ended up happening is that blacks are probably about 12%, Latinos are about 17%. They're growing exponentially, and they're not having abortions as what blacks are having. So what ends up happening is that they end up taking opportunities that blacks who've been here since day one should be getting these opportunities.
Now get to the question part quickly.
Okay, the question part is this, and I'm leading up to this. How is it that you can come to a historically black college, talk about how you're 3/4 to 2/10 black, but you're
4%.
Okay, 4%, sorry. But you're very much in support of DACA or in support of immigration, which is actually going to cripple the black community. Very much so. Give you another example, the STEM program.
Let me answer it so that,
Okay, let her answer that
so
one.
that we can get to the other. As I just said, I believe, you disagree, I believe immigration is a net gain. I think immigrants, buy houses, rent houses, go to school, drive cars, and I think they create opportunity. I think they create employment. I frankly think, I think that the African American community and the Hispanic community have got to band together. Hispanics have got to do more to help the African American community in some of the issues that are very specific to that community. And I think we're stronger when we are together. And I'm happy to say that I'm seeing that more. I am seeing the Black caucus in Congress and the Hispanic caucus in Congress do more together. I saw Hispanic leadership going to Selma and marching arm in arm with the African American community and Congress people to mark that. We've got to be more sensitive to each other's needs and be less about, be less in a silos. One of the problems we have, I think, as a country today is that it's too easy to live in a political silo where you just listen to and read and consume what you already believe and reaffirms that. And I think it's, it's important to have friends that don't look like you and don't think like you, and see where they're coming from too. Yeah.
Okay, let's take all three of the questions out there and let you comment at the same time.
Well, you kind of.
But make it a question.
Okay. I grew up in a town that was black and Hispanic, about 50%, 50-50. Why do you think up until now there hasn't already been a black, Latino, Hispanic, coalition yet? Like, what do you think is blocking that?
Okay. Well, let's get all the questions.
Okay.
Yeah, my question is this. How's Republicans just break with intelligence committee? I don't know if you heard the news, just a breaking news this evening. Like they reach a conclusion that Russia has not helped Donald Trump to win the election. That is Republican House led in Republican House Congress. Now my question is this, do you believe in this led Republican Congress? And secondly, do you believe Russia investigation is a witch hunt?
Do I believe Russia what?
Investigation is a witch hunt.
Is a witch hunt? Okay.
A witch hunt.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and yours?
My question is, what are your thoughts or views on Trump deciding to visit Kim Jong-un,
North Korea.
tongue twister, yeah, in North Korea, and what are the Republicans planning on doing, or how are they preparing for that meeting with that crazy man?
Look, I got
Which crazy man?
Kim, the other crazy man.
The only thing worse than one crazy man is two crazy men. Look, I'm generally against, making any concessions and meetings and giving legitimacy to dictators. I did not like it when Barack Obama went to Cuba. I thought it was way too many concessions, unilateral concessions to Cuba in exchange for very little. That being said, to me, this is a different case because this guy's got nukes. And so there's a sense of urgency to this that there isn't in other cases. First of all, I don't know if it's going to happen, because what we've seen with Trump consistently is that he makes these grand announcements, about immigration, about gun bills, about barring gays in the military, about, name your poison. He makes these grand announcements, and a day later, 2 days later, he changes his mind. The guy, it's like government by yoga. He holds more positions than a yoga instructor. Most of the times it's downward dog. And So I'm not sure that it's actually going to happen. And I think that there's a deep concern about the preparation that's going to happen for it because, frankly, the State Department and on the foreign policy front, we are grossly understaffed right now. We've got no ambassador in South Korea. We've got no undersecretary of state for Asia. The person who was the North Korea advisor resigned. So, there's some key elements that are empty. I think that this is an urgent matter. People in places like Hawaii, the West Coast, are living in anxiety over it. I think, Kim is continuing to develop nuclear weapons, and so I think that we should go all out and not giving him concessions, but certainly trying to make some sort of deal and see if the situation can be tamped down. And look, much more prepared people than Trump have tried and failed. So maybe these guys go there and they have a Yo Mama contest. I mean, maybe somehow they understand each other in a way that Barack Obama and Bill Clinton and George W. Bush failed at. I mean, Kim Jong-un's favorite American is Dennis Rodman.
That may be the starting point for the conversation. What about the question about, is this a witch hunt, the Mueller investigation?
I don't think it's a witch hunt. I mean, there's, 5 guilty pleas and something like 20 indictments already? That in itself tells you that, when you've got the guy who was the national security advisor pleading guilty to things, no, I don't think it's a witch hunt. I think the House investigation has been conducted in a very responsible way, very partisan. I think, its credibility is shot. I think the Senate is doing a much better job. They are acting in a bipartisan way, Senator Burr and Senator Warner. And I think Mueller is doing a very thorough job building a case. I'm, getting closer and closer to Trump's inner circle. Do I think it's going to lead to impeachment? I don't. But look, it's already done some, positive things in making sure that somebody like Michael Flynn, who was doing things that in my view are treasonous, is being held accountable. And I forgot the third
The
one.
other question was about why there hasn't been a Black-Latino coalition until now.
Oh, because I think we saw each other as competitors, not as allies.
I think we still see that.
I
in
think
many communities.
I do, but I think it's less. I think it's less because there's been some different priorities. Latinos have had to deal with the entire immigration issue in a way that the African American community hasn't. But even on the immigration issue, for example, one of the issues that's come out is the entire diversity lottery visa issue. It's really one of the only ways that people from Africa come here. And, and I think that when you saw Donald Trump refer to El Salvador and African countries as shitholes, we realized we are together in this. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you for all your questions. Thank you for your presence. And thank you for everything you do.
If I could just have your attention for 1 minute here. We do want to give to Anna a couple of tokens from Morgan State University in appreciation for her being a part of the series. And so the first, as we give to all of our speakers, is this piece here, which says Presidential Distinguished Speaker Series, Anna Navarro, March 12, 2018, Morgan State University, Growing the Future, Leading the World. Once again, thank you very much. And then we know that you, of course, live in Miami, and it doesn't get that cold in Miami, but of course, on some mornings, of course, you may have a need to walk through the city here. And so we want to give you this special Morgan State University sweatshirt. It's actually a hoodie. Thank you. Thank you.